So if you've been playing Dune Awakening, you've probably noticed towards the late game, a resource keeps popping up over and over again, and that's going to be called Spice Melang. So let's talk about Spice Melang, or more importantly, Spice, and where you can find it, how you can get the most of it, and how you can go about the end game, because all the crafting recipes in the final tier of weapons, vehicles, armors, all of that is going to require Spice Melang. And Spice Melang is simply put a product or a refined version of Sand Spice. Now, Sand Spice is that purple resource which you're going to be able to find throughout the map. It's also going to be found in more abundance in the deep desert. So let's talk about Spice and how it is going to be spawning, how you can be able to find it, and how you can get the most of it. So the first important note is that Spice is going to spawn in Hagger Basin, and it's going to be signaled by a huge kind of like explosion sound with a very big like air blast where you can actually follow the blast to try find the source. It's going to typically have like a purple cloud, like a nuclear mushroom, so to speak, that's going to indicate where it is spawning. Obviously, this mushroom is going to be shorter or smaller depending how big the yield is. Some spice fields are going to be smaller ones, and the smaller ones are typically going to be yielding about 500 sand spice. Now, it is important to note that in the Hagger Basin, you're only going to see small spice fields. I've never seen anything bigger than small, so it is not going to give you a whole lot. I think one usually spawns about one every half an hour in Hagger Basin, more or less. That's at least when I hear these explosions. And it's actually worth noting, you should probably go after these, especially in the mid to early game. If you have a helicopter, you should be getting this periodically, because I've actually lost track of how many times I've ignored the spice explosions in the Hagger Basin, only to realize that if I'd actually gone out to get all of these, I would have had thousands and thousands and thousands of more spice if I actually went out to get it. It's very easy to ignore, but it's actually something you might regret later, because there is another way of getting spice, and this is where it's going to become a lot more complicated, and that's going to be through the deep desert. Now, the deep desert is going to require that you have a helicopter. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't bother trying to even get spice in this game if you don't have a helicopter, because you're going to have to go onto open sand, and that's where it's going to spawn, and it's going to be very dangerous if you have to go on foot or a vehicle, because you're going to have to be there out for a while and harvest it, which means you're going to be vulnerable to sandworms. So in order to access the deep desert, you're going to have an ornithopter. It doesn't matter which one, as long as you can fly, and this will allow you to actually access the world map, where you can then go to the top left to get into the deep desert. If you want to find out more about the deep desert, I'll leave a link to my deep desert guide, what it's all about. But let's assume you know about the deep desert, you know what's happening there. Let's talk about how you can go about the deep desert, because it's a very dangerous place. And it's dangerous because it is PvP. And that is a far bigger threat than any sandworm can ever be, because as we all know, humans are unpredictable. People, you can't really predict what they're going to do. Some people can be friendly. Some people can be psychopaths that want to just murder everyone. You don't know what you're going to come across. So you have to be very careful when you are out in the deep desert. Now, it's also important to note, not everything's going to be equal and fair. You might be on a scout helicopter without any defenses or rockets, while a team of 6 people with rockets might come flying up to you and blast you into little pieces, and that's going to make life a lot harder for you, because you might be playing solo, you might be 1 or 2 friends, and you might be outnumbered. So you're going to have to assess your ability. I'm assuming if you're watching this guide, you're probably going to be playing in a small team or solo, because if you're in a big team, obviously this is very easy. You just go in with a bunch of helicopters and everyone's going to run away from you because they're scared of you, and you can just harvest whatever you want. So this guide is obviously going to be more intended for people that are playing solo or in smaller groups. So when you're in the deep desert, it's going to function more or less the same way. You're going to hear periodic explosions of spice, and there's going to be a mushroom cloud, and there's going to be a spice field. Now, there's still going to be the small ones, there's going to be medium-sized spice fields, and there's going to be much larger ones. Now, the explosions are going to vary depending on how big the yield is. The medium one, you will see the mushroom cloud will typically linger for several minutes. You will see this mushroom cloud, and that is both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because you as a player can find it very easily, but it's a bad thing because it's going to attract a lot of attention, and other players are also going to end up going there. So that's going to be a little bit dangerous. I think the bigger ones are probably going to have close to like 100,000 spice. I don't know the exact number, but they're absolutely massive, and you can pretty much go to town there and farm to your heart's content, assuming you were alone, of course. But unfortunately, chances are you're not going to be alone. So you have to be very careful when it comes to these bigger spice fields. Now, for the most part, the smaller ones are fairly safe. They don't really give too much attention. And the bigger tribes, the big alliances, they're not really going to care that much about the smaller fields. So for the most part, you should be able to harvest them somewhat safely. Again, sometimes people are just out for blood, and if they see you on the ground, they're going to take the opportunity to just launch some rockets at you and try kill you. So you have to always be on your feet. When I'm out in solo on the deep desert, I like to kind of just fly around, and you're going to want to go towards the later stages, or the further into the desert. The deeper you are, the more abundant you're going to see these larger spice fields, and the more frequently you're going to see the spice. Another very important thing to note is the refinement, aka the spice refinery. There's going to be essentially 3 tiers of spice refinery. There's going to be the small one, the medium one, and the larger one. And these are actually very important because you need them to harvest spice and turn it into Spice Melang. Now, it's also very important to note these spice refineries are going to have very big benefits the further down the path you go. The small one is going to refine spice at a rate of 100 spice to 1 melang. Then the medium one is going to convert it at a rate of 75 spice to 1 spice melang. And finally, the largest spice refinement unit is going to convert at a rate of 50 to 1, which means the better the refinement, the more yield you're going to get, essentially giving you a 25% bonus every time you upgrade. It is very important to note that when you do start harvesting spice, make sure you try and build these spice refineries because they're going to give you basically discounted spice rate for future. So I like to make sure that you build the spice refinery before you start building the advanced armor bench, advanced weapon bench, advanced vehicle bench, and going crazy with all that stuff. Consider investing in better spice refineries because they're going to appreciate that in the long term. If you're going to play the game for a while and you're going to go after all the spice, that is going to add up when you think about it. Every time you do end up crafting a piece of armor or a vehicle or whatever using spice melang, and you're using maybe a larger spice machine, you're essentially getting a 50% discount, which is going to add up in the long term. So make sure you try work towards those first before you end up building all the end game items that you need. It is also worth noting the deeper you go in, the more difficult it is to get out. So if you do get chased, it is going to be difficult to get out. But it's very important to note, especially if you're playing solo, use the Scout Ornithopter. And the reason being is because the Scout Ornithopter is a lot faster than the Assault Helicopter. Now, the Assault Helicopter, when you put a storage module on it, yes, it can hold more spice, but it's going to be a lot slower. It's going to have much worse maneuverability. And if you don't have rockets on the assault helicopter, other than the extra storage capacity, it's just the worst scout helicopter. You're going to have a much harder time escaping other players. If you're in a scout helicopter and someone is an assault helicopter, you can outrun them and you can get to safety. Whereas if you are an assault helicopter, you are going to have a bad time if you are getting chased. So keep that in mind. You can go in an assault helicopter if you really want to. If you think you're going to be safe, go for it. But for the most part, especially if you have high serve activity, there's a lot of players online, there's a decent chance if someone chases you while you're in an assault helicopter, you're going to get blasted. Which leads me to my next point. It's very valuable to build a forward base in the deep desert. You can build one in the safe zone, the PvE zone, and you can also build a smaller one out near a spice field. And what you can actually do is if you see a medium or larger spice field, you can actually use one of those rock formations in the ground, build an even smaller base there, build like a structure. You can build a very makeshift structure. Just bring some granite with you, enough for a generator, a little bit of fuel cells. You can build a very makeshift base, bring some materials potentially for a penta shield so that you can actually kind of fly into the base if you have to. You don't have to, obviously you can always land and then you can pick up the weapon with the storage device, but if you don't, you can also just build a small penta shield, just big enough you can fly your helicopter in it, and that's great because this is going to make life easier for you, since if you do end up getting to base, it will give you a lot of freedom. If you're right by a spice field and people chase you, you can fly straight to your little base, go inside, and it's actually very difficult for players to crack this. It's going to drain all the fuel cells while the shields are up, and if you have a lot of fuel cells, it's going to require a lot of rockets to get through. So players typically aren't going to want to invest that much time to get through it, and even if they are, if you have a scout helicopter, you have enough time to carefully pack up the scout helicopter. You can safely put it then into your vehicle storage device. And hey, if they have the effort to go through your entire structure and kill you, it's not the end of the world because you won't lose all your loot. You'll keep most of your equipment. The only thing you'll end up losing is some of the resources you're carrying, your money that you're carrying, so you shouldn't bring money with you. So don't take resources you care about into the deep desert. You'll have your vehicles safely stored in your vehicle storage device, and it won't really matter too much if you die. So that's another tip. If you do see a medium to bigger size spice field, you can also potentially build a forward base by it. You can just keep bringing resources across, put a storage device there, go farm some resources, quickly bring it back. And then you don't have to do these massive trips all the way back to base and forward, back to base and forward. Not only is this going to give you a lot more safety, but it's also going to just make things a lot more convenient for you, so you don't have to do multiple long trips. Now, another important thing to note is when it comes to these bigger, medium or larger spice fields, keep in mind that it's going to draw a lot of attention and a lot of other players are likely going to go to it. Sometimes you might find people that are chill. They might say, you know what? I'm going to let this guy mine. I'm going to mine. We can both harvest at the same time. There's plenty to go around. You will come across people like that. But you also come across people that are going to be like, nope, this is mine. Get out of here. I'm going to shoot you. So what I like to do is typically, if I do end up seeing a spice field, I like to put a marker on it and then come back to it later and see if it has been harvested. Sometimes people don't actually even notice the medium ones. The larger ones is very hard to miss, but sometimes, hey, that does actually happen every now and then where a larger one goes unnoticed. But those medium ones are typically going to be noticed, but when they don't, sometimes they do get unnoticed. You can put a marker there and fly to it back in 20 minutes, 50 minutes from now. See if anyone has harvested from it. If no one has harvested from it, there's no more cloud in the sky. That means that probably no one knows about it. If no one knows about it, you can go ham and just mine as much as you can. Keep bringing the resources back to your base or your forward base, ideally, and go again and again and again. You can typically get easily like 20, 30,000 spice from one of these medium-sized spice fields if you keep harvesting it, and that is great, obviously, especially when you're playing solo. Just be smart about it. Also, when it comes to harvesting spice, you do need to note how the sandworm mechanic is going to work. So when you land, you are going to essentially, the second you touch the ground, a timer is going to start. You're not going to see the timer, but there is going to be a timer that's going to start. So it's roughly going to be about 20 to 30 seconds, and after the timer, the sandworm is going to aggro. So what I like to do is typically land the helicopter, start using the static compactor, shooting a bunch of spots on the ground, space them fairly wide apart, obviously, and then get back in your helicopter, take off, and look around you, see if there's any other players. This also resets the time of the sandworm. So when you do take off the ground, wait there a few seconds, land back down, and then go pick up all the spice that you ended up shooting with the static compactor, and just keep doing this over and over again. Just make sure you're resetting the sandworm timer. There's nothing worse than mining this dust and the sandworm aggro's on you. Then you have to wait for the aggro period to dissipate and then land again. It's just going to make things a lot more difficult. So just get into a flow of landing, harvesting a bit of the spice, getting back in the vehicle, go up, look around you, check if there's other players, going back down and resetting this timer over and over. You got to be a bit sneaky when you're playing solo or in smaller groups. Don't go for the biggest pile of spice you can see, because you're probably going to end up getting shot down. I see a lot of people constantly complain they're ending up getting shot down constantly when they're playing solo. And for the most part, playing solo, even though my server does have a decent activity, I've only been shot down once, and I think I could have avoided that one as well. For the most part, I've been left alone, and that's because I played it very smart and very sneaky. So just make sure you're aware of that. Now, it's also important to note there is one final method of getting spice, which is going to be the most efficient, but also by far the most risky. That is going to require you to build a carrier helicopter, and then one person is going to ride the helicopter whilst another person is going to then ride something called a harvester, which is another vehicle you're going to have to craft, very in-game vehicle. Very expensive vehicles, these. You do not want to be losing these because they're very expensive. Now, I don't recommend you do this method unless you're in a big guild, because it puts a big target on your back. Another team sees you on a carrier helicopter harvesting spice with a harvester. You're going to have no defenses. You're going to have no way to deal with this, which means you're going to be a big target. Therefore, unless you have a couple of buddies with you that can have rockets on their helicopters to protect you while you're doing this, I would very much recommend not doing this unless you are in a guild of at least 5 or 6 people, because this is going to put a very big target on you if you try to do this. It is going to give you great results. It will give you a lot of spice, but again, it's very slow. It's very vulnerable. These helicopters and harvesters have no defenses, so you're going to be a sitting duck. They're quite slow, and they're very big targets, so very easy to hit with rockets. So I would not recommend going through this route. Overall, when it comes to spice, I think it's very doable as a solo player. All you got to do is be a little bit sensible, avoid other players, be sneaky about things, and if you are going to try stay under the radar and you are sneaky, you actually can pull it off. It's not that bad. I know people have been complaining a lot about the PvP, and the PvP is a big issue in the game. I agree. However, if you are sneaky, you won't be getting blasted out of the sky every 5 seconds, unless your server has some absolute maniacs who are just out there to play Call of Duty all day long. You should be fine. Anyway, I hope this video helped you. If it did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Let me know in the comment section below, what are your thoughts on the in-game content in Dune Awakening, and how are you finding PvP? What is your experience so far? I'd love to find out, and I'll see you guys again next time. Take care, everyone, and bye-bye.